Igor, how are you today, brother?
Doing great. How are
Y-
you?
I'm fantastic, man. I didn't ask where you were calling from.
So I live in Dallas, Texas right now. So
Mm,
yeah,
but you,
slightly warmer than where you are, I think.
yeah. Well, I'm Columbus, so we're getting cool. We're on the eve of winter. We're like, we're backing into winter right now. So it's like 50 and windy today.
Nice, nice.
So Igor, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what you're up to right now, and then I would love to go back to the beginning because I was reading your bio and I know that there's like going all the way back to your family. You have a crazy story, so I'd love to hear that from you.
Yeah, it goes a long way back. It's many twists and turns, right? So look, I was born in the former Soviet Union, the motherland.
This may be a stupid question, but
Yeah,
what part of the Soviet Union?
and that's not.
Because
It's a
that's
great
a
question.
big area.
It's a
That's
big
not a
area, and it used to say it used to be okay just to kind of round it up and say I'm from Russia.
okay.
But that's a really dicey conversation, these days. So I actually stopped saying I'm from Russia because you get funny looks. So Soviet Union, USSR, before, Russia was just one of the states, 15 states, if my history is correct. So I'm from a tiny little place called Moldova, which
Okay.
is kind of wedged in between Romania and Ukraine near the Black Sea. My mom's from Ukraine, so I spend most of my summers in Ukraine with my grandparents there. So I kind of grew up there. I was English is my second language. I know it's very easy to tell with my Aussie accent.
Yeah, man, it's a juxtaposition of things. For anybody who's just listening, Igor, like I don't say this with any sort of prejudice of any sort. You look Eastern European. You look like an Eastern European fella.
And that's exactly where I'm from, and I have an Eastern European name, and yet I'm an Aussie living in Texas. It blows people's minds.
Right, right. Yeah.
So we moved to Australia when I was 10 and a half. Just
So
before I
so
went
you
over.
did live in the USSR for
I
quite a
did.
while.
I
It
grew
wasn't
up
like I
there.
got plucked out when I was 6 months.
No, man, I was there. I remember it. I remember certain incidents from it, and hopefully we'll get into some of that sort of origin story. But my entrepreneurial career, as such, really started back in communist USSR, and it kind of never stopped. But so I grew up in Australia. Melbourne, Sydney. Grew up in both. Finished college, university in Melbourne. Traveled around and moved to the US 3 years ago, to Dallas, Texas. Expanded
Oh,
my company, so only 3 years here,
yeah.
and about a year, just over a year, being in the United States, land of opportunity. I actually my company got acquired, which was a dream come true. And
Results not typical for anyone considering moving to the United States.
yeah,
I just
how
want
do
to
they
add
how do
that in
they
there.
say it here in the ads? Past results may not mean
Yeah,
future,
yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
Yeah, that. But it's still the land of opportunity. I love this country and I love everything it has to offer. So I'll just put that out there. I'm actually a bit of a super geek. I come from a tech background. I was always in computers. So, I used to have really fat glasses, but I had
Mm.
laser eye surgery in 2003. So looks can be deceiving. And I sort of came up in tech, and I ended up in golf by accident. So the company I built and expanded and sold was called 24/7 Golf. Started off as like an indoor golf training center, then turned like a 24-hour training center with no staff, like those 24-hour gyms.
Mm.
One did well, one failed completely. Pivoted to e-commerce. Couldn't get product to Australia, so I started making my own product, manufacturing in China. Expanded that. COVID hit. The one, COVID. A lot of people suffered. We're in Melbourne. It was the longest lockdown in the world,
Yeah.
286 days, if I remember correctly. And but business grew like crazy. Expanded to the US. Opened like a partner office in Europe as well, and then got acquired by a company called GolfTech, which is the largest golf teaching training company in the world. They have a GolfTech in Columbus, Ohio, maybe more than one actually.
Hey.
Um, and that's been sort of the main theme. But I have a golf app as a startup, and written a couple of books, invented a board game. Yeah, living the life.
Looks like we got two golf techs, one in Dublin and one in Easton, man. That's
Yeah,
this
there you go.
one in Dublin's probably, 10 minutes away from us. It's crazy.
Nice, nice.
So, let's go back to the beginning, man. What do you remember about the USSR?
It's a weird place, man. I don't know if this happens to everyone, but when you move countries, there is a really interesting thing that happened to me rather. I kind of have like almost amnesia of the first 10 years of my life, except like certain snippets, like a little like
Mm.
photo frames, like black and white photo frames. Um,
Mm.
I mean, there was a lot of I grew up in a bit of a relevant topic these days. I grew up with a lot of anti-Semitism in having being Jewish. Um, in kindergarten, teachers used to beat me with a plastic shovel,
Mm.
just for being Jewish. A lot of discrimination at school. I remember sides different topic, but just one of the crazy things that I remember. One of those moments. I remember in phys education class. This is like grade 3 or 4. So like I was like what 8, 8 or 9. We were learning how to throw anti-tank grenades as part of
Mm.
PE classes. So you roll under the tank, you lie flat because the flanks have flat bottoms. It goes over you, you get up and you throw it on the back. You throw it on the back because the petrol tanks are at the back of the tank.
Jeez.
I still remember this. I don't know why I remember this,
Every
but
kid, plays cops and robbers, but it's not usually like sanctioned by the school to like describe
yeah.
how to blow up a tank.
Yeah, exactly. So I remember that. I remember my first business. I was at a school, a camp in Sebastopol over in Ukraine, which is the port city, which is in the middle of the war now. Going to the beach and selling water on the beach, and because there's no water fountains or vending machines, and getting my parents and getting hauled into the Communist Party headquarters and being accused of raising a bourgeoisie, little swine and all that, and then being super proud and kind of going, we got to get the hell out of this place. Uh,
Mm.
and that's kind of how we ended up leaving. Is my parents wanted a better future for me, and we got very lucky through a series of fortunate events. It took 3 years to get the visa to come to Australia, but we ended up coming to Australia in '91. So I don't know if that kind of paints a picture of USSR, but it's kind of like those movies you watch. It's actually a pretty good depiction.
Yeah.
Uh,
What do you remember about like obviously you have that story about you being a young capitalist, but what do you
yes.
what do you remember about like capitalism or just like the way that the system worked? I mean, you're 10, so you don't really have like a lot of perspective, I don't think.
Not a lot of perspective, but it's an interesting thing. I was, it's a conversation of nature versus nurture. I definitely was born a bit different, and so
Mm.
whenever, so like back at school, you'd have these marches, and there's a lot of brainwashing that happens, right?
Mhm.
So there's a lot of, you follow, they mold you into a compliant citizen, right? And have you read 1984?
I have.
Okay, so remember how in the book he talks about how, especially like they would teach the kids to dob on their parents, to
Yep.
report their parents, right?
Yeah.
It was kind of like that. That's the level of brainwashing that was happening over there, and I never bought into it, and it could be because of how my parents raised me, could be sort of some just how I was born.
What did your parents do?
So my dad's a software engineer. My mom worked in some, I don't remember what she did there, but sort of she worked in social work later, like in aged care, sort of doing training and program development, things like
Mm.
that. So like an educator. Um, but my grandparents, so my both my grandfathers were they were semi criminals
Mm.
because they were like semi capitalists. They did like side hustles and stuff, and so they would often get into trouble. And I think I got that gene from them, of just not complying and not believing the crap that was being fed to me even as a kid.
It's funny you say that because I think I have a little bit of that gene. Obviously, it didn't have to get molded in the same way that you and your family got molded, but I used to say that I didn't like authority, but that's not really true. I don't like authority when the rules are illogical. When
Right.
I'm like, these rules don't make sense.
Yeah.
Why can we only turn left here? It's like it doesn't make sense that I can't turn left. Like it's not unsafe to turn left. I can do it. It's fine. Like I'm gonna turn left. Like
Yeah.
forget these rules. And I think almost you have to have a little bit of that to be an entrepreneur. Kind of like buck the system type of thing because to your point, like society sort of just makes you a certain way, like go to school, be
Hmm.
uh, quiet, sit down, stay in your seat,
Yeah, stay
do
in your
this.
seat, sit down, put your hand up if you want to talk. Don't talk unless you talk to, all this stuff.
Exactly. And then what is that going to create? It's going to create someone who like go sit in your seat at work, sit at your desk, like don't talk too much. So to be an entrepreneur, you kind of have to be like, hey, I'm not going to do that. And it's funny because everyone like Elon Musk is really in the news right now. Well, he's he's a Texas guy now, so
Yeah, I know.
he's really in the news. And I someone said this, and I was like, wow, I really love that. They're like, you expect Elon to be able to like make a rocket company that can catch a rocket out of the air, totally reinvent the green tech world and the EVs. And you also are expecting him to not be like a little bit crazy on the side. Like, what are you asking for? And there's this Kanye West line. He goes, name one genius that ain't crazy. And you're like, that actually makes a lot of sense. Like, if you're going to have somebody who's so wild that they're like totally just like reinventing parts of the world, like, sorry, they're not going to fit into the polite little box that you wanted them to fit into on Twitter. Like, I'm sorry about that, but you got to take a little bit of the good and the bad.
It's like, sorry, not sorry. They're not really sorry. And you're right. And that there's a great quote. I can't remember who said it. I'm going to butcher it, but something along the lines of, there are two kinds of people in the world. They see the world and they see themselves and they fit themselves to fit the world. And there's those that see the world and they go, I'm going to change the world to fit me. And they're the ones who create you. It could have been a Steve Jobs quote. I don't know, but it's something like that. It's you cannot comply. You cannot be a complier. Is that a word? And expect to be an entrepreneur, a successful entrepreneur who sees opportunity and is willing to put up with what it is to be an entrepreneur, which is a bloody hard thing to do in general.
By definition, if the product you're attempting or thinking of inventing doesn't exist, then there's kind of this natural idea that, well, either A, it isn't a good idea, or B, really smart people out there have already thought of this idea and they've gone through all the steps and ideas as to why this won't work and why it can't be a functional product. But that's just not always true. Like, I have so many good ideas and I'm like, someone's probably already done this. This is a great one. Someone's probably already done that before. And you're like, maybe, but
Maybe.
if 1,000 people say someone's already done that before, and then one guy goes, all right, I'm going to do it, then like that guy's way closer to actually winning than the people who go, somebody's already done that.
Exactly. But the other thing I'll add to that is, since we're on topic of ideas and entrepreneurship, so I'm a huge believer of, it's not like, don't focus on the idea, right? Focus on the problem, right? So if you go look at a problem, go, why has no one solved this problem? I had a conversation yesterday, in fact, with someone, and then they were pitching this thing that they're building, and I'm like, I don't see what problem you're solving, and people fall in love with their ideas. I've been there myself, and then it's just an idea. And sometimes that is true. Like, maybe no one's done this because there is no problem that it solves, and therefore it's a useless idea. But if you look at it from a problem point of view and you go, hey, why hasn't anyone solved this problem? You just, it's very hard to kind of dismiss that, because if you see the problem and other people see the problem and no one solved it, hello, there's the opportunity.
Mm-hmm. The way I've heard it phrased is, you have a solution looking for a problem.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that was kind of the incident that you're discussing. Is this guy had a solution, but he didn't have a problem that he was trying to solve for.
And I've seen a lot of that. I get a lot. I don't know if you, in your sort of business world, or your friends circle, whatever, people are always coming up to you and like, hey, I've got this great idea. First question I was like, what problem are you solving? If they get stuck there, it's a tough conversation after that.
To talk about levels before we were, recording this, Igor goes, it's 12 million. He goes, or is it 20 million? And he goes, I can't remember. So that's kind of level Igor's at now. He can't remember if it's 12 or 20.
It's got a 2 in it.
Yeah, it's got a 2. It might be a 200. I don't even remember. So tell me about what Australia was like. I mean, that's probably got to just be like an enormous change in your world from this like sort of non-capitalistic and maybe a little bit of fear living in the USSR, because if you're not even allowed to sell water bottles on the beach, then you go to Australia, which is relatively capitalistic from what I understand.
It used to be more. It's shifted in an unfortunate direction.
Yeah, I've heard that COVID was like kind of like a reckoning for a lot of people in Australia, because it was, as you said, like very restrictive.
Yeah, that's a painful topic. Let's not go into politics. It's one of those weeks. Let's just ignore
Yeah. Well,
it.
Australian politics, don't worry. Not a lot of Americans have a lot of either knowledge or no disrespect, but a lot
That's
of
true.
care for. I
It's
was
okay.
I was interviewing somebody, and he was a European guy, and he was like, I'm interested to hear what Americans think about like, some of the things that are going on in Europe. And I was like, I think, have like an overstated perspective on Americans. I think a lot of Americans don't care at all about Europe. They're like, I don't, most Americans probably can't name like 5 countries in Europe, let alone pick them out on a map or tell you what their geopolitical like, functions are. So
There's some good jokes about some good memes about that.
yeah.
So no, I mean it was definitely a big change. I rode a kangaroo to school. No, that I'm joking. That's what people think. The change was it's it's a good question. It's a kind of hard one to answer because when we came to Australia, I didn't speak English.
Mm.
My parents learned a little bit, so they could just barely get by. But I literally had maybe 3 phrases I learned, and that was it. A little bit different to now, but I just remember growing up really poor. I remember growing up in very small apartments, in with a lot of hardship, and that lasted probably maybe a decade of maybe until I a bit less than actually. No, it lasted about 6 to 7 years until I really finished college, and even through college, I started earning money. I started my first business when I was 17, just straight after school. I discovered a thing called the internet, and a lot of people started discovering that, and I started building websites and doing database. Actually, one of my funny, I just remembered one of my first contracts was doing database development for like a millionaire matchmaker uh,
Mm.
type of business in Melbourne. That was really funny, actually. But I started earning money and sort of making my own way, and then also my parents got a little bit on their feet, and things got better. But the first 5 6 years, all I remember is just a lot of things you couldn't have, and it felt weird because you see all this abundance around you, and you want it, and I there was a big fire that burnt kind of inside me around that, where I really wanted to be out there. I wanted to get all this stuff, to get things, I wanted a Ferrari. That was the whole thing in my head, like from like when I was 13, etc. Right? When you learn
Mm-hmm.
what a Ferrari is. And this is before Instagram. I mean, God, I can only imagine what kids are like. I mean, my oldest is turning 10 soon, and I'm trying to figure out ways of like banning social media in my house. So I wanted all these things and I didn't have any of them. And that was fun enough, but that was also the fire that burnt inside me
Mm.
and got me to pursue success and entrepreneurship and just just think big, dream big, and go for it. I kind of felt I didn't have much to lose, if that makes sense.
When your parents first got to Australia, what did they do? Because I hear this from a lot of immigrants where, dad's I think you said he was in software engineering.
Mhm.
Dad's a software engineer back home, but now that he's in the United States, like he doesn't speak the language or his degree
Mm.
doesn't, move over. So dad's like, stocking shelves. And he's like, he's a software engineer back home, but now he's just like a guy.
Yeah, that happens a lot. I mean, my dad. We also arrived in '91, right? Which was and I think there was a recession in the US as well, but in Australia it was the biggest recession I've had in decades, and still to this day it was the biggest recession. So there wasn't a lot of work, and so he managed to get some kind of gig, earning a couple bucks, $5 an hour, um, putting together PCs. So his first job
Mm.
for the first 2 years is probably somewhere around there, was really just assembling PCs because that was kind of a new thing. Back in the '90s, putting together motherboard and hard drive and all that. Um, but he did end up getting a job doing software development, and funnily enough, he's still in that company now.
Mm.
So he left it for a while, but all up, it'd be what almost 30 years
Yeah.
in the same company. And my mom kind of went down a different path, and my mom actually has more of the entrepreneurial gene in her. My dad's like the stable one,
Mm.
um, but she also doesn't quite have the risk appetite that I have, which for many years looked like it would be a disaster, but it paid off in the end. And so they were working and trying to save money. And in our culture, it was very important to get education and to buy an investment property. That was a big thing.
Mm.
And so one of my dad's friends, actually, whose name is also Igor, he, when I was, I think, 19, he gave me Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. Said you should read this, and that got me started on my journey. But I jump ahead a little bit. But growing up there was just a lot of like being very poor through school, and then so when I got to college, is kind of when things got a little bit better, and then I started earning my own money, and then I started to kind of see the world as opportunity versus just a dream. And that was kind of a shift that happened probably when I was about 17.
It's funny you say that you got Rich Dad Poor Dad. You would be shocked at how many people, maybe you wouldn't be, but how many people come on this podcast and they go, I got introduced to entrepreneurship and I read this crazy book called Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's probably like 1 out of every 3 people who come on the podcast. I read it, It wasn't my catalyst, but it's one of the early books that I read on entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I mean, kudos to Kiyosaki. I mean, a lot of people, there's plenty of people that diss him. I don't know why. I mean, he's made a positive change to millions of people, I believe. And I don't really care if it's not, and even if it's not, if none of that book is real, doesn't matter. The main thing is the effect it has.
Oh yeah.
And somehow, guess what? He created a product that fit, that solved the problem, solved the need that the customers had, and he sold millions of those copies. For that same reason, right? It solved, and it wasn't just an idea; it was actually something that solved a real problem. Which is why success came with it.
Yeah, isn't it interesting that some people get shit for like giving out their ideas, and the best example of this is this guy that has somehow been able to escape like all scrutiny, but Dave Ramsey. Like Dave Ramsey, people just love Dave Ramsey, and it's like, dude, this guy is like the prototypical like guru. Isn't he? Like, first I got a radio show that I tell you what to do with your life, and then I got dozens of books, and I do seminars, and you come in and what do you get? You get a total money makeover. But but nobody's came for Dave Ramsey yet, and the best logic that I heard on this one is someone was like, he's fundamentally telling you things that are all true, that you like can't deny basically anything that he says is true. So it's like hard to come after him when it's like everything he's saying is basically a fact that, hey, if you spend less, get a second job and you'll be able to pay that debt down faster. It's like, I guess that is fundamentally true. Kiyosaki, probably if he just wrote that book, he'd be fine. But now he's done courses and all sorts of stuff.
Well, yeah, but it's a whole business, But hey, another thing that I will give him huge credit for is Cashflow 101, the board game, which inspired my board game.
I was going to say, I know he has a board game.
That's it. And he sold millions of copies of that. And I used to play it, when I was 19, 20, and there were clubs where you'd get together with strangers and play together and learn together and all that. And I remember having a great time playing those games and learning a lot. And it really did shift a lot of things in my life. So credit where credit's due.
Yeah. So how did you get into technology? So like approximately what year was that? That was probably like not at the beginning, but relatively early on.
I actually got into technology back in USSR. So, where my dad worked, it was like factory. I can't remember what they made some stuff, right?
Well, if he was in software engineering, then that had to be like
absolutely
late 80s, like mid 80s.
Oh, late 70s. He got into software when his first software whatever exposure was punch cards.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's like the computers.
Do you remember the punch cards?
No, I don't. I was born in '91, man.
Okay, you've seen them in
but I know what they are.
So it was like literally cardboard, right? With like, if it's a hole, it's a 1. If there's no hole, it's a 0, right? So that was the binary, and they would like run it through this machine that would read the code through based if there was a hole or not in the punch card.
How wild is it that now you can just query like ChatGPT, like, like how big is the universe? And it'll give you extremely thoughtful, like we went from that to this in what, 35, 40 years?
40 years. Yeah. 40 years.
Crazy.
It's nuts. Imagine the next 40 years. That's the exciting part, but we'll get to that.
Maybe exciting
so
dystopian.
Yeah. Well, that's true. There's a lot of dystopian sci-fi, which I think is going to come true somewhere. But anyway, so my exposure was really very young, back in USSR. So they got a computer, they got a PC, and obviously they came preloaded with some games. no one knew how to play the game. So I would come in as a 6-year-old and just like press random keys on the keyboard because I didn't speak English, and the keyboard's in English.
Mm.
And I learned how to play games when I was like 6 and 7, and I would teach the adults how to play the games. And I got hooked. Um, Again, nature versus nurture. I definitely had a lot of nature built into me because, like, my dad's in software, I'm in software. My 9.5-year-old is building like AI podcasts using like ChatGPT and like Make.com.
Jeez.
He's not even 10 yet. Like,
He's
it's
gonna
scary.
crush us all. That's exactly like what I, hope my kids can do. Just get out
Oh,
there and learn all the stuff that dad's not smart enough to learn right now.
and he like, I'm like, I get sort of I get it pretty quickly, but like the speed at which he gets it is scary. And now I'm teaching him how to use ChatGPT, the voice thing. So you can just, and my daughter as well, she's not even 6 yet, but like their universe now, is like you just press a button and you talk to it and it answers you. And you can ask it whatever the hell you want. And it knows a lot more stuff than your dad
Mm.
or your mom.
Yeah.
So,
I saw a video guy. What he'll do is he'll turn it on behind him as he's reading, and then he'll be reading, something really difficult,
uh-huh.
Dostoevsky or something like that, and he'll be like, "What did he mean when he said this thing?" And then
Uh-huh.
ChatGPT will just like regurgitate. Well, what Dostoevsky was talking about was. It's like, oh, and then it gives me like a little bit of history of the USSR while it's at it. It's like, oh, that makes so much more sense. I was like, oh, that's an interesting use case.
There's cool things, and I love gadgets. There's one I've got here, this little thing called Cloud. You just you wear it like a chain, like this, right?
For anybody
And
who's just listening, it looks like, almost looks like a little USB kind of
yeah,
stick.
it looks like and you wear it and you press it, and then it'll record whatever you want, and then
Ah,
it'll summarize it. It'll do a mind map for you. It'll transcribe it. It's like your AI assistant. It's super cool. The product placement. I'm actually not sponsored by them. I just love the product.
that is pretty
Um,
cool that you could just instantly hit record and then you kind of just, hey, I
yeah, it's
have
like,
this business idea.
okay, you may be too young for this. Do you remember Star Trek?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so remember when they used to press the button and then talk to the computer?
Yeah.
I'm like, this is literally that.
Yeah. The joke about that is that they had like all this technology, but they couldn't figure out cell phones. They had like, these like very rudimentary ways of communicating. They're like, how did nobody like plan for the cell phone?
I know, but there's a lot of there's a book that actually like shows all the things Star Trek predicted, and there's a documentary. I think it's narrated by William Shatner, that actually goes through it as well. It's really cool. I mean, the amount of stuff. I mean, so in fact, to the point where what my CTO in my app company, he sent me a Star Trek like segment from like early '90s. Where do you remember Data, the guy that's got like the glasses thing? And he's trying to solve this problem with the computer, and then the computer generates this AI version of the founder of this thing that he's trying to solve, and he's having a conversation. I'm like, that is literally what you can do with ChatGPT right now. You can go, hey, I want you to pretend to be Einstein, and I want I want to have a conversation with you about special relativity or whatever. Probably
Hmm.
got that completely wrong. I'm not a physicist, but the point is that there's all this stuff that happened, and it's coming true. It's scary and cool and slightly scary.
Yeah, I've started to read a little more sci-fi. I don't read a ton of fiction, but if I do, like that's kind of the avenue that I read because I've just heard some smart people say like I like to read kind of science fiction
Mm.
because it's sort of a like hypothetical view of what the future
Yeah,
could look like and it gets kind of the wheels turning and that's been
yeah,
fun for me.
yeah. If you want recommendation, there's a British author named Peter F. Hamilton. He's got a couple of trilogies, Pandora's Stars, like probably one of the best sci-fi I've read. But Philip K. Dick,
Yep.
The Foundation, all that, like classics. Really cool stuff.
Yep. Philip K. Dick has a bunch now, like, very famous books that have become movies, Minority
Yeah.
Report, and all of
Oh yeah,
those.
it's very cool.
So what was the first kind of like more productization you were able to do with technology? I heard you said you were doing some matchmaking, but like, what was like the first thing that you're like, oh, wait a minute, this is actually kind of like a business.
Well, it was actually so the matchmaking business it wasn't my business. I was working for them, but that was kind of
Mm,
part of the process. So the first thing I really saw was there's a thing called the internet, which I happened to stumble upon almost by accident. Right, I was doing work experience through school when I was 15 at like a equivalent of NASA in Australia,
mm,
and they had the internet, and no one's ever heard of the internet before I got there. And I was at a radio telescope facility, And I started using the internet. I'm like, this is so cool. This is going to change the world. And by the way, like the feeling I had then, this was 95. I was 15 and a half. The feeling I had then is the feeling I have now about generative AI. So like ChatGPT plus also like, you know, what's called Mid Journey,
Mm-hmm.
etc. Claude AI, all of that. So the feeling is similar. But back then, internet just came out, and I walked. I used to like. I remember I used to go to a chiropractor, right, to get adjusted. I had a bit of problem with my leg, and so they had these brochures. You walk into the office, and there's these brochures in a plastic little sleeve thing, and I'm like, why don't you put that on the internet? And the guy's like, what's the internet? I'm like, business idea. And
Mm.
so I literally said, well, I can take that and literally like copy it and put it on a thing called a website. And I explained that, and I'll charge you $100. And so that was literally my first business, is just doing that for all these businesses around sort of where I lived.
Mm.
Uh, and then I got into coding because I always experiment with coding when I was younger. So I got into coding, and then I got jobs at other places like matchmaking company, whatever. And then I worked for one of the first .coms in Australia, which was actually an e-commerce startup. I was employee number 6, and in a year they had 120.
Whoa.
We used to eat pizza, drink Coke, sleep under the desk, just like in the movies.
Mm.
And it was awesome. And in fact, we built the first mobile, like a mobile phone, e-com little site on like Nokia 7110. Like on that little character screen, like this big,
Mm-hmm.
crazy. But that was back in '98,
Hmm.
and so that's kind of how my whole tech career started. And I loved tech, but uh, when I finished college and I finished an information systems degree, so I learned all about project management and security and yada yada. It kind of makes you a consultant, that degree. And everyone, said that you really want to be an Oracle or an SAP consultant to make a lot of money.
Hmm.
And I went, okay, that sounds pretty good. So I kind of stopped the business because, I was making a little bit, but, I was hustling and all that. It wasn't really a proper business as such. And after college, I went and basically ended up working at SAP as a consultant. So I continued my tech career there. So I kind of had this parallel, and it's happened a lot in my life where I had like a career path that was like parallel to my entrepreneurial path. And like I would drop out of my career path to focus here until like I lost all my money. And then I would go back and like get a job and pay off all this debt I built up. And I did that like 4 or 5 times. Um,
Yeah, I was listening to one of the other podcasts, and you said you were almost $1 million in debt at one point in time.
yeah, yeah. But I'm like the Lannisters. I always pay my debt. I really hope that analogy lands.
Yeah. So, what were some of those businesses while you were corporate
Yeah,
startup,
so when
pivoting
I was
back
at
and forth?
SAP, I was in a kind of division that was like transformation. We would like go in and basically run transformation as SAP is getting implemented or upgraded in all these very big enterprise companies.
And so, like SAP, what they're doing is they're coming in and they're setting up like all of the software for these major companies,
Yeah, it's like
essentially.
accounting part, project management part, materials management, distribution. So it's like a really large enterprise. It's one of the biggest software companies in the world. And then, they, like one of these projects is like 20, 50, $100 million,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's how much it costs to put it in. And so, but it's also, and it was, I don't know how it is now, probably the same. It was very German, very structured, which made it really good, but also made people really hate it.
Ooh.
And so I was kind of in the part of the business where we would kind of teach people how to use it and not hate it as much.
Mm.
And I happened to become the youngest, as far as I know, as I was told back then, the youngest senior consultant in the world at like 22.
Mm.
And
It sounds like a
um,
good job.
it's yeah. Listen, I was in like 100 grand plus. I was traveling around Asia. I worked in Jakarta, and Singapore, and Tokyo. I was living a pretty cool life. Um, and when I got to that kind of promotion, I was like, well, when's my next one? Because I was young and hungry and all this. And they're like, yeah, you need to wait about 10 years because you're too young and no one wants to listen to you. Because like from there, you got to go like project management. You got to run teams and like who which 40, 50-year-olds are going to listen to a 22-year-old know-it-all. And I'm like, yeah, well, screw you. That doesn't really work for me. So I left. But before I left, so as I had this job, I was building up. So going back to Robert Kiyosaki, he had an advisor named Dolph DeRoos who wrote a book called Real Estate Riches. And I read that book as the second book. And he just went, buy property, renovate, revalue, get the equity out, buy the next property, rinse and repeat.
Mm-hmm.
And I just did that. And so I went from zero. My parents helped me buy the first property. They lent me the 10% deposit for the first one. And then in 2 years, I had 14 properties. I had $3.5 or $4 million of property.
You were going.
I was going. And, but I was also going through some pretty tough mental, you know, depression. I was very lonely, very, very depressed. So I was looking, for self-help, and a lot of it talked about becoming an entrepreneur and quitting a job. So I did. So, this whole thing of like, hey, you got to wait 10 years. And then all this stuff I was reading about how, to be truly happy, you have to quit your job. By the way, it doesn't really work. Don't,
Yeah.
don't follow that advice.
Yeah, there's another solution looking for a problem, right?
You're correct. But, it sounded really good in all those self-help books I read. And so I quit, and that whole thing of wait 10 years until you get next promotion pushed me over the edge. But as I quit, I lost my whole property portfolio because the bank, miraculously, something that they never really did, decided to call my employer to check that I was still working there, because that was part of the condition of the mortgages I had. And then when they said, no, he quit 3 months ago, they went, oh, really? Interesting. And basically fire-sold almost all my properties, which was my own fault. Like, I take full responsibility. I was 23 and stupid. I didn't know how to do it differently.
We've all made a couple of those youthful decisions. They're never going to figure out.
Yeah, that only cost me $1 million or so.
Yeah.
And so as I was broke and down to my last 20 cents, literally, I started this consulting company, kind of doing what I did at SAP. And within 4 years, I had 22 consultants and $4.5 million in revenue by 27. And then I lost it all again. Halfway through that, I decided to give 40% of my company to these two consultants there were a couple. They worked for me, delivering the project. I said, look, I'll focus on growing the business and doing sales, and you do the delivery. And I gave them 40%. They didn't sell it to them. I gave it to them. Lesson learned there. And December 31st, 2006, the business is doing 4.5, doing great. They decided to basically before that, they formed a company in secret and started diverting revenue to their personal company. And they kind of switched everything over, the biggest clients, on the 1st of January, 2007. And overnight, I lost 80% of that $4.5 million revenue, and lost everything again. So that was not a fun time.
Yeah. People are weird, right?
Yes. And I've learned that there's always opportunity for kind of people to screw you. But I also refuse to be that cynical person that doesn't trust anyone.
I agree.
And
totally.
now my wife tells me all the time I'm way too nice. So we gotta have a different, like, I trust people until they give me a reason not to trust them. She's like, they gotta earn my trust first. So we struck a good balance. But it taught me a lot of lessons. But again, it was on me. I made a lot of mistakes in that process. And ultimately, if you truly, my view is, if you truly want to be successful in life, you got to own your shit.
Yeah, having business partners is tough too. So
it is, but also
looking back, and you did that willingly, I'm sure you're just like, ugh.
It's tough, but it's also it can be rewarding, it can be amazing. It really just depends. I think there's no. People say I'll never have a business partner. Like, well, okay, but then you could be limiting yourself from some amazing opportunities. Really, are you just going to make a blanket rule? Now, if you're happy with that, okay, all the power to you. I just think I think every situation is unique. What I learned from all these years of kind of, I call it, hitting rock bottom so many times that I have a membership card. What I learned from that is that what truly makes a difference in your life is having the tools, the experience, the knowledge, but like a toolkit of things that you can rely on to get yourself out of those situations.
Yes.
And then once you have the tools, having the trust in yourself. And I think that part is actually the thing that I see most people struggle with, is trusting yourself that you are going to get out of it. And they kind of drown themselves in the problem. And in the end, it kills them, instead of kind of trusting that they will find a way out, and by that trust, looking for solutions.
Yeah, an entrepreneur I really like, Alex Hormozy. You probably know him, but he
Of
talks
course.
about he had something like 6 gyms. He had worked for like a decade building these 6 gyms, and he sold it, and he made like a couple hundred grand, and then he instantly invested that with some partner, and the partner literally just absconded off with the cash to another country, and he's like, "There's 10 years of work down the drain," and he's
Yeah.
like, "That was like obviously my first thought on that, but then eventually I'm like, okay, well no." 10 years of business put me in a position to be successful in my next business. Like, all right, just like time to suit back up, like go after it again. And he took those things that he said he learned over 10 years. And he's like, within like 9 months, I had a business that was worth, like $1.5 million, like 5 times the worth of
Yeah.
my previous business. So he's like, it wasn't all in vain. What I got was like myself. I grew myself throughout that process. It sounds like a very similar story to yours.
Absolutely. And not just story, but stories. Because I've had so many of those moments, and so many. And people ask me, "Would you do something different?" And there's a romantic version of you that says, "Yeah, I'd love not to have had through that. I've been gone through that." But the kind of the true side of me looks back and goes, I wouldn't change a single thing, because if it wasn't for all of those moments, those sliding doors moments, those very painful lessons, I wouldn't be here right now having the life that I have, having the experiences, and also having the appreciation for the things that I do have, having gone through the pain that I have. Because there's plenty of people that are born with a silver spoon, and they end up pretty messed up because they
Mm-hmm.
don't know what it's like to value things. And it's kind of sad that that happens, but it happens very often.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, how many times have we heard about people who are really successful, like by parents, and then they just start kind of just trying to find something to do with themselves. They don't have to like go out and do
Yeah.
something. They're just finding something to do with themselves.
Yeah, and it's something that successful entrepreneurs. I'm a member of Entrepreneurs Organization, which is a great network, and there's like a subset of like EO dads. So dads who are parents or dads and have a business. It's kind of a little, not just entrepreneurs with families, and working on how to become the best dads they can be. And there was a great phrase someone said once. It was just amazing. And they said, you can't, because we're sitting at a table and having lunch, and like all these very successful guys, and we all come from nothing. We're all built from nothing, and we all have kids, and we're trying to figure out like how do we teach our kids the hunger that we had, because we had nothing. And someone said this, and it's so true. You cannot fake poverty, right?
Mm.
The lesson, the fire that burnt inside all of us to build what we have, our kids do not have that fire because they live in McMansions, and have self-driving cars, and fly front of the bus from the like yada yada yada, right? They live in a different world. So if you want them to have that hunger, you got to figure out how to give it to them in a different way. But that trying to
Mm.
fake poverty is not it. That doesn't work.
It's like camping out back at your house. It's like,
Yeah.
this isn't really camping, Dad. Like, we can go inside anytime we want. If we get cold, we can go inside. You know that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Exactly.
What was the next rock bottom?
Um, Man, I had like I got into a car rental business. Well, actually, no. Before that, I have this amazing mentor. I call her my second mother, Carolyn. She said to me, she's a commercial litigator. And I met her, and I was like ready to sue these guys. And she said, "Listen, you sue them, they go bankrupt. You down another 500, 700 grand in legal bills, and you get nothing. Take that energy, take that money, and reinvest into rebuilding the company." And so that's what I did.
Mm.
I borrowed up against the last house I had, and I started rebuilding the company. And I kind of, it took a year to kind of get momentum going, and then I was like, hey, I was about to win about 750 grand worth of work with like three really big clients. Like one of them was Alcatel-Lucent, one of them was One Steel, one of the biggest steel companies in Australia. And then March 2008, global financial
Mm.
crisis, and same week, three phone calls, projects are gone, all my revenue gone,
Mm-hmm.
and that was nervous breakdown time. That was a new rock bottom. And then I had to go get, after I think 6 months of eating ice cream. That was my substance of abuse of choice. I'm kind of lucky I didn't get into more dangerous ones, but sugar was my thing. Uh, I kind of got a job, started repaying my bills, started climbing out, eventually I got involved in a car rental business. I used to rent out exotic cars.
Mm.
That was one of the business I had. Um, I had, but again, that crashed. It was like these things like they go up a little bit and just crash, go up a little bit, crash. Um, but eventually, I kind of started this 24/7. So I actually no, I got involved with bought a business with my best friend Damon called GolfTrak Australia. It was a golf indoor facility with teaching, and we built that. It did okay, but out of that, I pivoted and I started this 24/7 golf thing that I wanted to open these unmanned like gyms,
Yeah.
but for golf, I wanted to see if people would use it, without any staff there 24 hours a day. And first one did okay, did well, and I thought, you know what, I can open hundreds of these, and then I went to open my second one, and it
Hmm.
completely flopped.
Uh,
I borrowed 100 grand from my parents to open that, and I blew that. Um,
Look in the mirror and go,
yeah, yeah, no, I had a lot of those days.
yeah. I still
I
have them, and we're doing well. So it's like you're like, geez,
absolutely, yeah, same here. I still have the, is it imposter syndrome? Is that what it's
imposter
called?
syndrome. Yeah.
Right. Uh, and yeah, that maybe that's like a survival mechanism, but I'm not sure if it'll ever leave me. Hopefully, but maybe it's a good thing to have it remain somewhere. But I looked at myself and I had all these moments where I'm like, why the hell am I doing this? And especially because throughout, so as I was kind of building these businesses that were kind of going up and crashing, I actually, I kept a job for most of, not all those times, but there was moments where I kept a job, and my whenever I would go into a job or a career, I would go so quickly up through the kind of the ladder, and like I'd get into senior management and all this, and I was just so good at it. And you know even like my wife and I would sometimes talk, and it's like, can I just quit all this business crap and just have a job? Because I was earning a couple hundred grand a year, senior tech job, and I'm like, I could just do this, like, and keep going up, and but I just couldn't. It just wasn't me. I had this thing where I would wake up and I would look at the mirror, as you said, and go, what is wrong with me? That I could have this path that, like, shiny lights, nice and pretty, seems so easy, comes naturally to me, and yet I go back and I think, I don't believe I was put on this earth for just average.
Mm.
And for me, it was going down that path would have been what I call like emotional suicide, where I would be
Mm.
alive, but I would be dead inside. Like I'd be just rotten because I just couldn't imagine living that for the next, what, 30, 40, 50 years. Like, I just couldn't imagine it.
There's a
I'm like,
quote.
no, this is not it.
Yeah, there's a quote from Tim Ferriss where he says, "The worst thing that could happen isn't crashing and burning. The worst thing that could happen is living out your life through tolerable boredom."
Yeah,
And it's
I
like,
love that.
yeah. I mean, that's what a lot of people do. Like, they're just kind of tolerable boredom throughout life, and you're like, I kind of like this job, but like, it's not my favorite thing that I do, and I kind of like my hobbies, but like, I'm not really that into them, and I like my girlfriend. She's okay. Like, she's pretty enough. And most
Yeah.
people are in, kind of region beta. Have you heard of this idea?
No,
Re-
region beta. I like
region
this.
beta is when things are like good enough that you don't quit them. But if they were actually worse, you would quit, right? So that first job you had, it sounds like it was bad enough that like you quit. But if it was just like a little bit better and they went, yeah, you can probably make like, whatever, senior manager in like 3 years, you might be like, okay, 3 years? Yeah, I could do 3
Yeah.
years. I could put 3 years in. But because they told you 10, it actually like got you to quit. It's like if you live in a house that you kind of like, but it's not like clearly not your dream house. If that house was just worse, like if it was like, mold infested, you'd be like, we have to leave now. So you're kind of stuck in this region beta where it's good enough for you to continue doing it. But if it was actually worse, it would be better for you because you would get up and leave.
It'd be the catalyst that makes the transformation. In fact, I do some keynote speaking, and my topic actually, it's funny you said it. I'm gonna figure out how to put that in, because what I talk about is this whole concept of rock bottom, right? And I've hit it so many times, and I'm like, why wait? Why wait to rock bottom to transform your life. Why not go, hey, you know what, right now, today, even if you're doing good, if you're doing amazing, why not say, hey, this is the lowest point that I'm willing to accept in my life, and I just want to go up from here. This is, even though this is great, this is going to be my rock bottom. This is the standard that I'm willing to accept right now, but nothing below that, and go up from there. Why wait to crash? And that's it. I love that idea of kind of having that region where you got to be a little bit uncomfortable, right? If you're trying to build muscle and you go to the gym and you just go there and you just lift a little bit of weight, like it's not going to build anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need to feel that little bit of pain the next day, right? That lactic acid, the little burn. Otherwise, just like there's nothing happens.
Yeah. To your analogy, and that's why so many people, whether it be alcoholism or whatever thing that they're into, they say, I hit my rock bottom. And then it's like, that's when I bounced. But
Correct.
if you just like, you drive home drunk and you get home and then, your wife yells at you, you're like, okay, well, that wasn't really rock bottom. But it's like when you like, smash into a pole, it's like, God, I hit rock bottom. And it's just
Yeah.
exactly that. Like, it wasn't that bad. If it had been worse, it actually would have been better for you because that would have enacted the change that you needed.
But we all have, and we all have it in us, whether you're an entrepreneur or not. The decision is in here. It's actually even that rock bottom moment, right? And I've been to keynotes where someone's gone to jail, or someone killed their best friend in a car accident, because like that drink driving thing, whatever. They go like, that was it. I'm like, why did you wait for that to make that decision? Because ultimately you still made the decision, because you could have gone rock bottom and went, yeah, screw it, I'm still going to be a deadbeat,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you made a decision. Why wait? We make a decision, and when we don't make a decision, like that region beta that you talk about, right? Where you're not making a decision, guess what? You're still actually making a decision
Yeah.
not to make a decision.
Correct. Yeah. So you eventually get into this golf business. Were you like an avid golfer? Is golf a big thing in Australia?
Golf is a very big thing in Australia, but I was completely not in golf. I got into golf by accident.
Mm.
So I was in tech, like I said. I was consulting at Australia Post at the time, trying to pay off my debt. I was like in tech projects, and my best buddy Damon, he was quite a good golfer, and he's like, "Listen, man, you gotta try it out." Like, you were saying your friends are like, "You gotta try golf," and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not." I used to race cars in my 20s. I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not really into golf." You gotta try golf, and so I tried golf, and I got so addicted. So be
Mm.
careful. If you try it, as your friends are kind of pulling you in, like you might get so addicted you'll never
I've
see the
I've tried it enough that I don't think I'm your target market. And
Okay.
my friends, I was just about to say, my friends, it's like drinking alcohol. Like when they're doing it, they really want you to also do it. And it's like,
Yes.
dude, it can be fun if I don't do it. Like, trust me, like you can have as much fun doing it if I don't do it. That's like, I'm sure of
It's
it.
true.
Come on, man,
It's
you
true.
have to come golf with us. No, I don't. I don't. Like,
Yeah.
they're like,
So
business is done on the golf course. I'm like, is that even true? Like, like you've went and met with like one box company on the golf course. That's like we didn't even need that supplier. You guys just wanted to golf.
yeah, yeah. So he was like that. You got to come play. So I tried it, and then I got so hooked, and so it was an accident, and I got into golf, and obviously, and then so I opened 24/7 Golf, and kind of how I even got into e-commerce is an accident. There's these moments in our lives that are sliding doors moments, right? And when you look back, there is no like one point in my life anyway, in my career, where I could say I made a very conscious decision to pivot and like go down this path, right? It was like I hit a dead end, and I'm like, well, there's a path there, I might as well go there. And then all of a sudden something happened. So that happened to me. So I opened my first center. So the golf tech business did okay, but not okay enough, and I lost lots of money on that. Over the period, I gave up a very successful career. Like I said, probably $1 million in earning that I gave up, plus invested money into it, and it was like didn't really go anywhere. And then I opened this 24/7. First one did well. Second one, I borrowed money for the second one, opened that up, completely crash and burn. And as I closed it down, I had like 4 golf simulators that I needed to sell that I had in the venue.
Mm.
And so I listed them on Facebook Marketplace, like I get some money back. And it sold really quickly.
Mm.
And I went, oh, this is interesting. So I went and bought another 4, and I put them on again, and that sold really quickly. And I went, there's business in this. And so I started. So as I was working, and this is another kind of rock bottom moment when I was like so out of money, I was about to lose that last house where my parents lived. And I remember I was 100 like around 110 days late on my mortgage, and at 120 days they take the house away and they sell it.
Mm.
And I managed to get a low paying IT job. I had to lie on my CV and all that to make it sound rosy that I was, this all this amazing experience. I had this amazing experience. It just wasn't relevant to, a low paying IT job. But I got the job and I managed to climb my way out. So as I was working, um, in the job, I started selling these things on the side, and I built a website and started selling it. And
So
and then
you were selling other people's simulators at that time?
yes, I was selling like the devices mostly, right? And like the box that tracks the ball, right? So there's a box that generally tracks the ball, um, and two, three, $10,000, that kind of thing. So it's just a reseller, and people in Australia wanted the whole setup. They wanted the screen and the mat and the this and the that, and but it was the only way to get it was from the US.
Mm.
Like if you buy something for like $3,000 in the US, it would cost you another $3,000 to ship the thing because there's no metal poles and all that. So I found a factory in China, started manufacturing it, and I started bringing them in by air shipping it, and that was expensive, but it proved the market. And then I, got to a point where I'm like, I'm going to buy a container, and I rented a little warehouse, and I bought a container, and I brought it in, and it sold,
Mm.
and the business started growing, so I started manufacturing and I started designing my own products. And then I actually patented my enclosure, and started selling it. And then I started selling it in the US. In fact, my first warehouse was actually in Ohio. It was actually, I don't remember the town name, but it's near Columbus.
Mm.
It's a small town. And I started selling to other partners. And then as I said, COVID hit and the business just kept growing.
People were probably at home. They couldn't go out. They couldn't go to the golf course. They're like, I want to golf. Let me just buy a simulator for my house.
Hey, listen, in Melbourne, you couldn't even go fishing. It wasn't safe for the fish, obviously, right? Um, and so, when golf was banned, it just went crazy. And US market went really well. And the reason I could really grow in the US was I was manufacturing. There were only two other companies I think that were manufacturing, and I just came in at like half their price, and I just
Mm.
flew. So I basically undercut everyone. And then I also went to B2B, so I would sell to other companies and like white label for them, and that kind of worked out well. And that's really was the catalyst for kind of that business growing. But while that business was growing, like going back years ago, I had this crazy idea. So this box that tracks the ball is generally, now it's between 600 and call it $20,000, right? Back then it was more like 2,000 and 20,000, right, for the box. And I had this thought, well, I wonder if your phone can do this. And like the cameras on the phone are getting better, and this is like back 2016. And 8 years later, they can. So I started this other startup as that, talking about identifying a need. What I saw was that all these people wanted golf simulators, but there was always, especially through COVID, there was chip shortage and all that, and it was hard to get inventory of these simulators.
And these
But
simulators are not, they're not a low priced thing.
No, they're not. And you also need to be quite an avid golfer to really commit that kind of money to set it up. And I always thought, you know what, if someone could just use their phone, millions of people could buy it and use it because there's no distribution. It's just so easy. And so that was my, I had this idea and started developing it. And it took me 6 years to bring it to market.
Mm.
It's been in the market for 2 years, and it's like a open beta. Uh, but these iPhones are unbelievable now, the cameras in these things, and so we're within 5% error rate of like the best devices out in the market.
Mm.
Um, and so, but that I sort of digress there. But my whole thing in golf was, I ended up in golf by accident, by a couple of sliding doors moments.
Mm.
Even the e-commerce manufacturing pit was like I said, it was just selling on Facebook Marketplace and going, wow, that was easier than I thought.
Mm. So, at what point does acquisition of your simulator business become a reality?
So, funny enough, remember I said that so my best friend Damon and I, we actually bought this teaching company in Australia called GolfTrak Australia, which is totally unrelated to the GolfTrak in here in the US. But I got a phone call one day, it was like 2012. 2013 from the founder of GolfTrak USA going, hey, why the hell do you have our name and our
Yeah.
trademark?
Right.
And I'm like, who are you? I've never heard of you. And anyway, we became friends. And we tried to actually merge the companies and all that, but it was completely unrelated. But we tried to raise capital in Australia to take out like a master franchise for them, bring it into Australia. Raising money in Australia is like pulling teeth
Mm.
from stone. It just wasn't going to happen. But we stayed in touch and all that. And long story short, they bought a company called SkyTrack, which is a simulator box, that I used to resell,
Mm-hmm.
and SkyTrack Golf. And then the day they announced it, the founder, that same founder that called me like 10 years ago, called me and said, hey, I was actually pitching them and SkyTrack to sell white label my product, like the enclosures. And they said, listen, instead of like white labeling and selling your stuff, how about we just acquire a company? And I went, okay, that sounds interesting. And back and forth, and we basically we did a deal. And it's been amazing. Like even after COVID, sort of growing 600% during COVID, the first year together with GolfTrak, we grew the business another 600%.
Mm.
And it's been an amazing journey. It's been a really amazing ride.
Isn't that wild? That phone call, could have probably devolved into you two just screaming at each other, like, F you, man, like send me your lawyers, and
Yeah.
and it didn't, and it turned into a great business.
I think rule in business: don't be a dick, and rule number 2: don't burn your bridges, because you just never know. And the golf industry is quite small actually, and a lot of people know each other, and there's a I'm sure you know this as well. It takes a long time to build a reputation, a good reputation, right? And it takes a second to lose it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. You say don't be a dick. I mean, dude, we have like clients that it's just really odd sometimes, like the way that they talk to us. I'm like, why are you saying this to us? Like you wouldn't say that to me in person. Like you wouldn't take that tone with me. Like, why are you acting like we're doing you a disservice? Be like, dude, we literally don't charge for our services. Like, let's take a step back here. Would you talk to your accountant like that? Your lawyer? Like, yeah, it's weird, man. I do not and fundamentally never will understand people who are dicks. Like, especially to people, it's like, this is your agency partner. Like, come on. Like,
I know, you put a keyboard in front of someone on the screen, and I mean, look at what's happened with Twitter and all these other like platforms, right? Look at how people act when they're behind a keyboard and a screen, and they have. I mean, that's with anonymity, but even without anonymity, people just turn into just some really weird beasts.
Yeah, and let that be a lesson to anybody out there. Like, you're gonna get more done if you're just polite with the people anyways. Like, let's say you missed my podcast. Like, I'm not going to be like, dude, this is unbelievable. Like, you wasted my time. I can't believe it. You're not going to come on the podcast. You're not going to recommend anyone comes on the podcast. You're not going to be like, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. Let me rebook it. You're going to be like, no, screw this guy. So I'm just like, hey man, like, missed you today. Like, let me know if you want to reschedule. If something came up, totally understand. Like, just be polite about it. And then if they're like, I just don't want to do this, then you just be like, all right, cool. Like, thanks, no problem. Wish you would have let me know, but no worries. Like, just move on.
Move on.
I don't know. Like, and I've talked about this before on the podcast, but Igor, when I learned this was when I was a referee for adult soccer leagues. So I did this job for like 4 years over the summer. And I played soccer, all throughout my life, and then I played in college. And I was like the first person to yell at the ref. And then once I started reffing and people started yelling at me, I'm like, screw that guy. Like, I don't like that guy. And what I realized was whether or not I wanted to, I had like a bias against the people who are dickheads to me on the field. I'm like, I'm not going to help you. Like, I'm not going to go out of my way to make life better for you on the field. Like, now, maybe that's bad refereeing. Like, and sure, if I'm refereeing the World Cup, probably you have to pull that bias out. But, like, it's there. It's, whether it's 3%, 5%, 10%, 1%, it's there. And I was like, oh, that doesn't help. Like, so just be nice to the referee. Like, hey, sir, like, I thought that was a foul. Like, can you just look for this in the future? That's going to get you a lot farther, whether it be in sports or
Absolutely.
in life.
No, it's treat others how you want to be treated. Lots of people talk about it. You can really tell, you know, what someone's like when they're successful and how they treat the wait staff at a restaurant.
Hmm.
I think that's a really good tell as well. But it's not just that; it's any how you treat anyone. Um, yeah.
So this acquisition happens, and presumably that's an exciting moment. But I've heard from a lot of entrepreneurs that you can have an acquisition and it still doesn't like fill that hole, like of things that you're like, I've been working towards this future acquisition and I thought it would, make me feel, fulfilled, but it didn't necessarily do that.
Well, I think there may be entrepreneurs, they're like business owners. They're kind of different things. I see. Like I'm a serial entrepreneur. Like I will never stop because I work so freaking much. Don't remember the last time I watched a Netflix series. Right? And it's not like I'm not saying this because I'm a hard worker. It's because like I find more joy in doing stuff, creating things, like educating myself. Like talk about Hermosi. I watch his 3 hour damn videos, right? Because I actually really enjoy it. I enjoy that more than watching Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and except for some documentaries, love documentaries.
Yep.
Like Graham Hancock's, love that
Oh
stuff.
yeah.
Anyway, yeah, big fan. So I love the process of creation. I love the process of innovation. It just fills my cup. The other thing I love is and really fills my cup is meeting amazing people. Like to me
Mm.
that's the thing about entrepreneurship that I really cherish. The ability to go and be available in the world, and I get that through golf, but I also get it through all the networks I do, and I participate in of meeting amazing people. So it definitely it was amazing, and it's still amazing. And I'm still pinch myself sometimes, like I can't believe I had an exit to and they're owned by public companies, so to a publicly listed company, and all the things that came with it. Especially as an entrepreneur, having come from Australia, moved to the US, like it's awesome. But it definitely didn't stop me, and it will never, like, and what I'm building now is like obviously one day I hope to exit, but I'm building it because I want to change the world in some shape or form, right? Whether it's with the app or with the board game or the books I've written, and I do it, and that's one thing I would like to teach my kids, but also teach your listeners, any entrepreneurs listening, is find the joy in the process. It's such a cliche, but the joy in the process is what gets you going, what keeps you going when things get really hard. Just that process. Like it's not the destination. The victory is in that process.
Mm.
And so I'm just always going to keep going.
Yeah, I've kind of heard it said that people don't find it cool that you have things. People find it cool that you're getting things. Like you're on your way. Like that's exciting.
Yes.
Like everyone roots for that person that's like, I'm on my way. I'm like, progressing in life. But once you're there, like people aren't like, sweet dude, cool Rolex, cool Maserati. People are like, F this guy. Like I don't care about
Yeah.
that.
There's I think it was Hermosi. Hermosi said it. His podcast with um,
Chris Williamson.
Chris Williamson.
Yeah.
Thank you. You read my mind. Yeah. So in that, he said people are jealous of what you got, not how you got there.
Mm,
I love that. I'm
that's
like,
true.
oh hell yeah.
Yeah. Because
No one knows those rock bottoms. No one
he's
thinks, oh, I wish I went through the 20 rock bottoms like you to get this Maserati.
right. He's like you. He's a maniac. He just is like, I love working. Like I want to work like 12, 14, 16 hours a day.
Hey,
It's
on my
like,
bucket list, I want to have lunch with that guy one day. I just want to hear a story from him. I mean, I respect that a lot.
well, I'm probably not gonna eat lunch with him, but I'm going to his workshop this Thursday and Friday.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm going out there
Fantastic.
in Vegas, so I'm excited about it. I'm really interested to hear. I think it's
Yeah.
gonna be some good
Let me know
stuff.
what you think.
Yeah, I definitely will, man. Um, so what about the tech application that you're still working on, the iPhone app? So is that your primary function right now? And I definitely want to get into the
So I
education, the book, and the board game. But
right. So it's one, like I have an amazing team there. I have about 15, 16 people that are doing a great job, and I kind of got into.
that's a big team.
Um, it is a big team, but I am a very I have this conversation with people. I'm like, when I hire them, I say, listen, I'm lazy and I love golf. So your job is to make me play as much golf as possible. Right. It's like, so it's kind of my way of saying, I'm going to get out of your way, but I've hired you to do a job and I'm going to trust you to do that job. And so I end up with the most amazing people in my team.
Mm.
Like hugely thankful. So that kind of is developing itself. I set the vision, of course, but I part of my acquisition, I still have golden handcuffs. So I'm on an earn out. So I'm helping grow the business as well. And try to maximize that for both companies, and our interests are very aligned in that. And so I kind of have that as my main gig. Then I've got this app, which is kind of like it's kind of building itself a little bit there. Um, and um, um, and then all the other stuff that I'm doing, like from whether it's keynotes or books or board game, whatever. Like that's kind of like a separate thing where I'm just like having fun and just creating. But I also like just about that. Like the first book I had published a few months back, like I wrote that 2007.
Mm.
I didn't I didn't feel like I could publish it. It was like I failed so many times. Like why would anyone be interested in what I got to say?
Mm-hmm.
So it took me the kind of having that exit and having that, I guess, success in terms of what I see as success, to take that step and actually share it with the world. And kind of same with the board game. That I started that in 2007, 2008 as well. I just I wasn't ready.
It's funny you say that because I wrote a book probably in like 2016, 17, 18, somewhere in that time frame, and I'm in a very similar position as you. I just don't feel like it deserves to be published. And I've gone back and read some of it. I'm like, you know what, this is actually not bad. Normally I'm super critical of myself, but I'm like, you know what, I don't hate this actually. This is not the worst thing that I've ever read.
Well, why not? Why not share with the world?
I think I'm
What's the
like,
book about?
it's called The $1,000 Business. So I
Okay.
started every business that I've ever been involved in with $1,000 or less. So it's essentially the TLDR is that take the $1,000, start a business, and then kind of the blueprint of finding what I would call a scalable, a profitable, replicable transaction.
You know that book, the Weekend Startup,
I've
or
heard of it. I have not read or
there's this that's kind of a similar thing, or there's the guy, I forget his name, is from Sweden or something. He was on Lex Friedman recently, and
I
he went
listened to
through a
that one.
year.
That was a really interesting one. Yeah,
Awesome
yeah.
podcast. What a story. And it's just the methodology of like, I'm going to take that month, I'm going to constrain myself, and I'm going to build a business in that. It's
What
awesome.
a quirky guy too. It's just like we'll build
Yeah.
these businesses that like lose money, and he's just like, I just like really think I need to keep it open because he's like, I have all these users, and he's like, there's no way to monetize it, but he's like, I just like it. Hood Maps. Did you ever check out Hood Maps? The
No.
Hood Maps was one of them, and it's actually pretty cool. It's like Google, but then you can go to like whatever city. Like, so if you wanted to come visit Columbus, you can like see like what the neighborhoods are like. So you're like, oh, I'm gonna stay in Dublin, and it's like it'll like have tags from users. So like the users can go in and mark it as like suburban. I think it's like suburban, like like touristy, like, and then like rich or wealthy areas, and then like maybe like no-go areas. But then people can put a tag, and then the tag can get upvoted. So like Dublin, it would probably say like, white guys who go to country clubs or something like that. So there's like all these like funny tags too.
Mhm.
Like, people just write like hood or like murder, like don't go here, like those kind of
Yeah,
things.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, but he's
Well,
like, dude, I lose a bunch of money on it, but I just love this app and people love it. So I was like, I think I have to keep it going. I'm like, what a crazy
and that
individual.
but that's the beauty. I love that because that's the it's like, to me, entrepreneurship is almost like art. Like sometimes it's just this most rewarding thing to put out something in the world. It's like it doesn't matter if you make money from it, but the process of getting that out into the world and seeing it come to life and seeing people use it, the joy you get from that is worth more than the money you lose on it. Because think about it, you could go and drop 100 grand on a car, and you go, yeah, yeah, or, I'm going to spend 10 grand a year for the next 10 years supporting this business that doesn't make any money, but I get so much joy from the fact that people love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean,
I think
talk
it's
about
cool.
Chris Williamson. He'd say that entrepreneurship is a personal growth endeavor masquerading as a capitalistic pursuit. And it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Can I tell you something interesting about Chris? I did a LinkedIn post recently about it because he was talking to what's the guy's name that wrote The 48 Laws of Power.
Oh yeah, not Robert Kiyosaki. You got him stuck in my mind. Robert Greene.
Robert Greene, thank you. Yes. He was talking about that, and he was saying how Robert Greene was on his podcast like number like 50 or
Yeah,
something,
very
right?
early.
Early, and then he said, and he was like at 820 or something, and I counted it was something along the lines of 700 episodes, 750 to go from he just started to one of the biggest podcasts in the world, 750 iterations. And if you think about that, that is not a lot of steps. Right. Now, there's a lot of work that goes into each one of those
Yeah.
iterations. But even still, if someone said to you or to him, if you do this well for the next 750 times, you'll be number one in the world, or, number three in the world, whatever it is, right? Like who would say no to that? But what people say no to is it's not guaranteed.
Yeah, and I think just it's I have a quote. It's not in this office; it's in another office, but it says something along the lines of, there's something like some 250 million or 250,000 podcasts out there, and most will never make it past episode 3. Like, 90% of them fall out after the first 3 episodes. And then of the remaining podcasts, most will not make it to episode 21. So it's like, to be in the top 1% of all podcasts on planet Earth, you just need to put out 21 episodes. And that's kind of where I am. It's just like, you just got to keep going, and you got to keep trying to get better little by little. Have a little bit, more engaging guests. You try to be a little bit cleaner with your speech. You try to put out a little bit better looking content. And it's not necessarily the big jumps that you make. It's the little ones, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So talk to me about the book, man. You wrote the book, and you got the game behind you.
Yeah.
You seem like someone who just can't sit still and just stick on to one thing. So you feel like you needed another thing to work on.
Absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, the book was something. I'll talk about the book first. That was an interesting process where. So, do you remember the movie called The Secret?
I never saw it, but I know
Never
I
saw it.
know the
Okay.
kind of like the idea.
Yeah. So it was a bit of a woo-woo thing. Now, I love the idea behind it. The whole law of attraction. But it kind of pissed me off. In fact, there was a really particular one scene. I told you I was into cars, right? And at the time, I had a Nissan 350Z or Z, sorry, that I used to do a bit of racing with. I used to also it was the first car that I rented out in that car rental business. Um, but and there's a scene in that movie where this guy is sitting on an armchair in his lounge room with a plastic steering wheel, dreaming up and imagining his dream car, which happened to be a 350Z. And I'm like, dude, really? Like, that's as ambitious as you can get. But the second thing is like, dude, really, you think sitting on a couch with a plastic steering wheel is going to put your dream car in your driveway? Like, you got another thing coming, man. That is not how it works.
Mm-hmm.
And so I shortly after that, I literally sat down and wrote this damn book.
Mm.
And I'm like, I'm a project guy. Like, I deliver projects. I have this experience with going from A to B, delivering whatever it is you want to deliver or a company wants to deliver. Why aren't people using that process to deliver the things that they dream about?
Mm.
And so I wrote this book called Practical Manifestation, which is, forget the crystal therapy and mantras. Let's get real. Let's go. How do you reverse engineer the entire like you want to? And so the book is actually about how to get a dream car, right? Because that was my process of how I got a Ferrari for free, right? And I got that through basically reverse engineering the entire process and then breaking down to tasks. And then the task I do today takes me one step further to the task I do tomorrow, which takes me another step further, et cetera, et cetera. And so really the book is how do you break down very practically how you manifest things, using the law of attraction, law of allowing, all this stuff, right? Not from a very spiritual point of view, but from a like, well, there's plenty of books about that, and how to allow yourself to get these things. But once you allow that to happen, how do you actually make it happen? What is the one step in front of the other step in front of the other step that makes that happen? And so that was the first book. And then the second book, which is going to be released early next year, but it's like a second in the series, is called Agile Manifestation. I'm an Agile project manager. I love Agile, run everything with Agile. And it's kind of using the same principles and really breaking it into, well, how would you do it in an Agile methodology, which is, I would think, is even more effective these days. And I certainly um, think, and have had great success with it. But like, think about Elon Musk, like think about landing a rocket back on space. Right? Imagine Elon Musk sitting there like and doing mantras. I'm going to land this rocket.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not how he does it, right? That's not how the whole team does it.
Mm-hmm.
Why not take literally what works for all these companies all over the world and just apply it to your life? Like, why is there no bridge between those two? Like, I know people who literally put like vision boards on their walls with like their dream house and their dream car and their dream this and their dream body and their dream holiday, and then they go to work and they deliver projects that are like thought up of, but they don't connect the dots and go, you know what, that dream house, I'm going to use the same process I did to deliver this software at work to actually manifest my dream house. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So that was the concept behind the
I
book.
think that you talk about the secret and all this stuff. I think that's all great. That's a good like starting point. Like
Right.
I'm believing, I'm, envisioning myself as a millionaire. But if that doesn't, like you said, kind of come back to the beginning and change the way that you behave, then you're not
Right.
getting anywhere. Like, I'm cool if it changes your behavior, that you're like, I'm a future millionaire. So future millionaires do this, X and Y and Z. But if you're just like you said, grabbing the steering wheel in your couch, it's not really doing anything for you.
Exactly. There's I don't know how I came across this one. I think I was watching one of the Alex Hormozy videos, and like I got like a little recommendation on the side, and I clicked it, stupidly, and it was this kid, very young. I don't know how old he, but like he's like his video is like he's like messy here. He's like in bed. He's filming himself like a selfie and go, oh, I just woken up and I made $1 million this month. And, like, and he's talking about it like he had to do nothing. He was sleeping all day in his bed, and I'm like, man, if there are people who actually buy this shit, like, wow, still really, but yeah, no, he's got like 1 million views on his video,
Mm,
um, and there's a whole, I think, self help like in section that is those kind of people,
yeah.
and they sell snake oil, and I've seen a bit of that, and I wanted to kind of create a different perception. I'm like, yes, look, you do need to believe in yourself. You need to kind of put yourself in the mindset of a millionaire, a successful business owner, et cetera, right? But sitting there doing nothing and waiting for it to come to you is not what successful people do,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if your question is, well, what do they do? That's what I wrote about. Right.
Mm.
What's the Salesforce has a really great, I don't know if you ever use Salesforce. They have in their AI component, they have a thing called the next best action, right? It's like a predictor. They were the first, I think, to release that this years ago. um, to me, that's like the critical thing, right? What is the next best action to get you to the thing that you want to do, right? I'm sure in your business, I'm sure you do this, right? I'm sure you look at, like, you want to create new functionality, you want to you want to onboard some new technology, right, to improve the efficiency of your business, right? You go, you break it down into a series of steps and actions. What is the thing I can do today that's that next step to that tomorrow?
Mm. Yeah, I love that you're reverse engineering also, kind of starting with the end in mind.
Yeah, start with the end and work back, because like you look at, you want a dream car. Okay, what are the two most important things you need to have to get your dream car? Like, what, you want to buy it for cash or you want to lease it? If you want to lease it, you need to have high credit score to be able to get the right. And if like you start going all the way back, like, well, to get a high credit score, you need to do this, and then you need to do this, and you need to do this, and then you get to a task that you can do today,
Mm. I love that
right?
task that you can do in the immediacy.
Right.
What about the board game?
Oh man, that's a big one.
Sounds
That's
like
that's like
that's
a bit of a passion
near
of mine.
and dear to your heart.
That is near and dear to my heart. So we kind of touched upon it a little bit earlier when we were talking about all those lessons we learned from rock bottom, and lessons that Alex and Rosie learned, or lessons, look at Elon Musk when, he was on his fourth launch with SpaceX. And if that launch didn't go, that's it. He's done. He's gone. Right. And my, when I went through all those experiences, and again, I wrote the game in 2008, and I kind of put it on the shelf, and I didn't do anything with it until last year. And I dusted it off, and I went back to all the lessons I kept learning and all the mistakes I kept making in that time between when I started the game and kind of when I released it earlier this year. And I realized that comment I made to you earlier, that if it wasn't for all of those mistakes, I wouldn't be who I am today. I wouldn't have the life I have. And I wanted to break down those lessons and make it available to other people. I wanted to, like this concept of hood maps, I wanted to crowdsource entrepreneurial experience. All the lessons that we as entrepreneurs have, they sit somewhere here, whatever. And I still read a lot of business biographies. I love them. And what I found is that a lot of them kind of skip over the hardest parts. Like one of my favorites is Shoe Dog. The guy that started Nike, right? Because he gets real. Another one is called Boohoo, amazing startup. Blew for $500 million or euros of venture capital. Great story as well. There's a lot of really good things to learn there. And I wanted to take, so the first version of the game is I've taken my experiences, the people I read about, my friends who are entrepreneurs, and I put them into the game. And the game is there to teach you. And I facetiously call it, getting punched in the face on a daily basis as an entrepreneur, because that's what we as entrepreneurs do. We are suckers for punishment. And the idea was to create a kind of a structure where you can experience those things in a gamified way. And like with Cashflow 101, hopefully, get together with people. And I did this as a board game, not as an app, for that reason. I want you to sit at a table with other people. I want you to, experience it socially so that you can learn from each other. You can learn how you react to different things. And so the game has it has opportunities, which is, pretty standard. But my favorite two kind of cards that you pick up are one is encounters, right? It's the people you meet in life that have an effect on your life, on your career, on your business. So there's one in there. I always use this as an example. There's one in there where you meet someone you think is going to be a great mentor. They turn out to be a con man and steal $100,000 from you. Happened to this guy. Right? And I'm like, that kind of stuff happens. And or you meet a great mentor and they increase your profitability by 10% in all your businesses. So if you have 5 businesses, increase all, etc. And the other card that is my favorite is deal with it. It is shit happens, deal with it. Right? So it teaches you resilience. It also teaches you financial management. You play the game through like a balance sheet and an income statement, and as well as these things that happen to you. And when I was doing play testing with the game, I had about third play test. I had this group of young men and women, like in their early 20s. They were aspiring entrepreneurs, and they gave me feedback. They said, "Look, we don't want to offend you, but like we feel this game is like not really like entrepreneurship. It's like it's about financial management and risk management, and all this. Like it's not like wheeling and dealing and like doing deals and this." I'm like, "Yeah, welcome to the real world. Like you've just given me the best news ever, right? Because this is actually what the real world is like. It's really and so the game is built on that. And then the second part I'm building to it is the ability for other entrepreneurs to put in their experiences. Like I'm putting together like a wizard on the website where every entrepreneur can put in their experience, which become a card in the game, and then other people can buy it as expansion packs in the future.
I like that.
But ultimately, did you know there are 600 million entrepreneurs in the world? 600 million.
It's a lot, but I believe it.
It's a lot.
I believe it once you start thinking about what 8-9 billion people on planet Earth.
Exactly. And in business, 1 in 9 succeeds, right? So that means 8 out of 9 usually fail. And I've started over 20 businesses. So I'm kind of roughly in that 1 in 9 ratio. And so if you do the math, like there's 5 billion, per year stories out there that have so many lessons in them. And my dream and why I get so passionate about it is imagine if, we change it from 1 in 9 to 1 in 8 or 1 in 7. What a difference that could make to the world. And so that's my little passion project, to try to teach people, but also crowdsource. It's like both, both sides of the coin, if that makes sense.
I love that. Where's it currently being sold, brother?
So it's just entrepreneurship.game.
Right.
It's just an online store, but I'd love to get on Amazon. So maybe there's a conversation.
We definitely can connect on that, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Igor, man, we started in the USSR and we've made it all the way through all these rock bottoms, acquisition, all the way to the board game, man. Is there anything we didn't cover that you want to talk about?
I think there's a lot there, and there's always more. But I think we've kind of done the loop. We've gone from USSR to Australia to America. Who knows where next? Maybe Mars.
Mars, yeah. All right, all right.
Imagine all the business opportunities are going to be there one day
I
when
can't.
Elon
I
Musk
can't
gets
even
there.
think of them. Your kids will probably be the ones taking those. Those probably aren't for us, right?
Probably.
All right, brother. Well,
No.
thank you so much. Where can people catch up with you?
Look, LinkedIn is always my favorite kind of channel, but you can find my book on Amazon. That is one thing you can find on Amazon is Practical Manifestation on
We will
Amazon.
link to that.
Thank you. Entrepreneuropoly.game, hard to spell, but worth it. So, jump on that and, or, soon to be on Amazon maybe. And just connect with me on LinkedIn. Follow me and comment and send me questions, etc. I'm very, I love connecting with entrepreneurs, interesting people, interesting stories. So don't be shy. Like there's, it's there for a reason. It's there to connect. So would love to connect.
Yeah, I saw right on your LinkedIn, your bio. It says, if you read all this, shoot me a message. Let me know. I was like, yeah, I like that. I might steal that.
Yeah, there you go. Thanks for having me. It's been really fun. I can't believe it's been we've talked for quite a while now.
Super fun, man. And like I told you, we're building a new facility. So if you're in my neck of the woods, you want to check on those, those old golf facilities. We got 2 of them in my neighborhood.
Sounds good.
All
Appreciate
right.
it.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.